July 22nd, 2016. Hi folks. Have you at one time or another considered the belief or the feeling that a tribulation is approaching, one that will bring great upheaval to the earth? It may be in the form of social unrest, economic collapse, political turmoil, or even geological instability. Any of these forms of tribulation can be devastating in their own right, but together they can be catastrophic to the world and to its inhabitants, namely each of us. In my previous video, Nibiru, Planet X system, and its impact on our solar system, I explained how the three outer planets of our solar system, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, were ultimately discovered by observing the gravitational deviations of the next closest planet to the Sun. So in the simplest terms, the existence of an unknown planet more remote than the outermost planet in our system was located by observing the gravitational motions of the furthest known planet, which would indicate that at least one more planet existed beyond the furthest known one, since its unusual gravitational effects have been observed. I suppose you could explain the deviations as sort of a domino effect. The orbital deviations of Saturn were affected by Uranus, which took 150 years to discover. Then when Uranus was observed, it took decades to learn that Neptune existed beyond its orbit. When Pluto was discovered in 1930, astronomers concluded that a much larger body was beyond it due to Pluto's unusual orbital pattern. And so the scientific evidence of the orbital deviations of the outer planets is conclusive. This is actually how the term Planet X came to be, in describing a mysterious yet undiscovered entity lying at the outer edges of our solar system. How many of you who are listening to this presentation are aware that the Pioneer 10 and the Voyager 1 and 2 space probes were especially designed to locate the precise location and trajectory of the so-called Planet X? In early press releases dating back to the 1980s, NASA stated and reiterated that this was the sole purpose of the mission of these probes. Then they suddenly retracted these statements, and they've remained silent ever since. So the question that remains unanswered, even today, is whether the press releases were a mistake, that they were never meant to be published, so that NASA would continue to confuse and mislead the general public about the existence of Planet X. One thing we know for sure, for all of the talk and published information that exists from the mid and late 1980s, which indicated that Planet X was found by an infrared satellite telescope, that story has somehow disappeared from the annals of time and has never been mentioned again. Now, some skeptics would dismiss this as a conspiracy theory, except for the very fact that the published articles from the Washington Post and the New York Times would tell a very different story, one of discovery of Planet X and its immediate cover-up. So you be the judge of what's real and what's fabricated here. So here once again in 2016, we are faced with the real possibility that an enormous object exists in the outer edges of our solar system. At least that is what we are now being told by two highly acclaimed individuals, an astronomer and a planetary scientist from Caltech University. But now we are calling it Planet 9 instead of the 10th planet because Pluto isn't considered a planet anymore, which has many of us scratching our heads about all of the confusion by the scientific community about what is or isn't out there. More importantly, why are other leading astronomers in the field of astrophysics reluctant to confirm the discovery by these two scientists from Caltech University? When one considers the implications of such a massive planetary complex in our solar system, is it any wonder they are remaining silent? How do you explain to the general public that a planet 4 to 6 times the size of Jupiter is in our neighborhood and does not orbit the sun in the same manner that the planets of our solar system do? So let's clarify so that you may better understand the specifics of what I am referring to. All the planets of our solar system move in a counterclockwise direction around the sun. However, the Planet X system is believed to be moving in a highly elliptical orbit, or what is referred to as an oval-shaped orbit, similar to the movement of a celestial body such as a comet, which would bring the entity much closer to the Earth, which is exactly what Carlos Muñoz Ferrara, who is considered one of the most brilliant astronomers of our time, was warning the world about decades ago. Have you ever heard a family member, a friend, or an acquaintance say that the Earth would be a much better place if there weren't so many people living on it? Well, have you ever considered that this is the exact thinking of the elites? If they are aware of the impending catastrophes that await our planet, as so many are, would it be in their best interest to inform us? No, it wouldn't be, because it would go against their best interest to do so. It would defeat the objective of the so-called New World Order, or a better existence for the few. Let's face the facts as bleak as they may seem. How many of you who are listening to this presentation are actually making preparations for the very real possibility of a major life-threatening event on the planet? My guess is that not very many of you are. So the question then is, why are you not preparing? And the answer, in all likelihood, is that you were being told by those who control the masses that there is nothing to worry about. The so-called Planet X doesn't exist, even though they informed the media back in the mid-1980s that they had found Planet X. That the publications by the Washington Post and the New York Times were all just a mistake. So go back to what you were doing and forget about it. There is no threat of a comet-like entity coming close enough to the Earth to threaten our existence, even though time and time again NASA has failed to identify incoming celestial objects orbiting in proximity to the Earth, until after they actually came knocking on our front door. So who is fooling who here? And who are the real fools? Those who are already prepared for what they know is coming our way? Or those who refuse to prepare because they rather believe those who tell them it's not real, it's all a fabrication, and there is absolutely nothing to worry about? If I were to tell those of you listening to this presentation that a planet or a system of planets, as in the case of the Nibiru Nemesis system, was going to make a very close approach to Earth in our lifetime, as the major news publications were suggesting more than 30 years ago when NASA declared the discovery of this system, you would say that I was crazy, that I am a fearmonger, that I am preying on the weakest and the most insecure of society. I know that is the case, because that is what some of you tell me in the channel comments that you submit. The most common response from many of you is that I don't see a thing in the sky other than the sun and the planets of our solar system, and therefore, because I cannot see a Planet X, then from my viewpoint, it does not exist. That may sound like a perfectly reasonable determination if your eyes are wide shut. But what if I told you that your reasoning is based primarily on something that cannot be seen, but still is there? What if I told you that the object in question is dark and emits no light, or very little light, or very little temperature output, requiring specialized telescopes which only the government has in their possession in order to observe it? What if I told you that amateur and other traditional astronomers would not be able to observe its approach until it was almost upon us, because this system has the unique ability to obscure its observations by most of us? Did you know that the Pope referred to the world's most advanced infrared telescope as Lucifer? Yes, this is true. And the reason he referred to the telescope as Lucifer was because it was especially designed to track Planet X, whose nickname is Lucifer, the daytime star, as it will eventually appear as a second sun in the daytime sky, or as it was nicknamed by the Chinese as the dragon, because of its red color and the wings of a serpent on each side. Malachi Martin, the Jesuit priest, who was an eminent theologian and Rhodes Scholar, who was a close associate to Pope John the 23rd, admitted just prior to his death in 1999 that the Vatican hierarchy is well aware of what is approaching the Earth, that the sole purpose of the Vatican telescope is to observe its approach, so that the Vatican may prepare for its passage, as indicated in Father Martin's own words.
The Vatican has a very, very great deal of power.
That's right.
We've talked about it. They have, whether they admit it or not, a great deal of political power all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they did fairly recently was they muscled, and I do intend to use that word, they muscled their way onto a mountain in Arizona, Mount Graham, and they built an observatory on Mount Graham in connection with an Arizona university.
Yes.
However, the Vatican has the larger part of the control of this observatory,
Yes.
looking at deep space things.
That's right.
Now, why would they have done that, Father?
Because the mentality amongst those who at the higher levels, the highest levels of Vatican administration and Vatican geopolitics, know that now knowledge of what's going on in space and what's approaching us could be of great import in the next 5 years, 10 years.
Carefully and well-chosen words, Father. Thank you.
When it comes to speaking of the end times, we often are confronted with conflicting viewpoints. On one hand, we have those in the scientific community who acknowledge that something exists out there, but refuse to accept a biblical or a prophetic fulfillment of reasoning with respect to the times. And then there are those who are devoutly religious, but deny the scientific evidence that a planetary body may have played a significant role in past geological events or future fulfillment of prophecy. So when it comes to satisfying the beliefs and logic of various fractions of society, we are left dealing with a stalemate. But there is one thing that the scientists and the scriptural scholars are in agreement on, that a large celestial object is coming our way, which in turn is causing asteroids and comets to be thrown out of their normal orbits. These events would usher in the beginning of the Great Tribulation spoken of by scholars and theologians. Its approach would have a great gravitational effect on the Earth, leading to increased seismic and volcanic activity, such as what we are witnessing today. Massive hailstones and sheets of ice would fall from the sky, much as what we are seeing today. increased solar flares, and very peculiar solar activity, such as what we are now seeing take place. All of these events in and of themselves would culminate in an economic collapse and lead to massive food shortages, which would in turn lead to disease and famine, which are happening in many regions of the world today. As these events escalate across the four corners of the earth, the results will be widespread wars and the necessity for martial law. All of these aforementioned calamities were prophesied in the scriptures in the following passages. Is there anyone outside of a few in the scientific or religious community who profess to know the logic and reasoning behind these extreme events, who actually have any concrete answers as to what is causing these sudden and drastic changes to take place on the earth? Think about this for just a second. In the past few years, the climate has become so extreme that millions of people have been forced into migration. We find that especially true in many areas of Africa and the Middle East. Our seasons have become so out of place that birds and animal life are being discovered in parts of the world where they would normally not be seen. The unexplained deaths of millions of land and sea animals in recent years has escalated. Now, I would like to pause here for just a second to point out and acknowledge that some of you want to blame the massive die-off of animal life on the Fukushima nuclear disaster. And although I do agree it has exacerbated the situation, it is not the primary cause of the decline of wildlife, as this was already occurring on a rapid scale prior to that disaster, for reasons that I will detail later on in this video presentation. So, additionally, the Earth's magnetic North Pole has been moving at a rate of 579 feet per day. All the while, the planets in our solar system have seen dramatic changes in their temperature, luminosity, and orbits, as I explained at the beginning of this presentation. The 11-year solar cycle is becoming longer, and the sun's optical spectrum, which was once very yellow in appearance, has become increasingly yellowish-white while emitting abnormal particles. Just recently, it was reported that massive black areas are appearing on the sun. But NASA once again tells the public not to worry. So, are all of these unprecedented solar system events a coincidence? Or is there actually something extraordinary in play that is causing all of these strange events to happen in such a short time frame? We know that Planet X is found in both secular and biblical history. The Sumerians called it Nibiru, the planet of the crossing. The Hopi Indians have referred to it as the Kachina, both the blue and the red star, both of which refer to the same planet Nibiru, which emits a variant intensity and spectrum of light as it makes its approach towards Earth. The Bible refers to this as Wormwood, which can be found in the passage Revelation 8, verse 11. Even astronomers who are in the know have called it Nemesis and Planet 7X, since they believe it to be 7 times bigger than Earth. Furthermore, its passage is mentioned in ancient cultures, from Babylonia to Egypt to Rome, and among the Mayans, the Aztecs, as well as the Iranians, the Persians, the Hindu, and the Chinese. Are all of these cultures and civilizations wrong in their interpretations and observations of a great celestial body that periodically passes through our solar system? There are some of you who believe that Wormwood is God's chosen instrument to bring about the Great Tribulation. The 2012 hype
was deliberately intended by the elite to convince the public that this and similar doomsday predictions are all hoaxes, so that the masses can go back to believing that nothing bad will ever happen to them. That is their intent, and that is what they want you to believe. The Mayans never indicated that the year 2012 would be the end of the world, but rather the beginning of a new era. It was the media controlled by the elite who wanted you to believe that the Mayans had predicted the end times as happening on that particular date of December 21st, 2012. So by having so many dates come and go without occurrence, the masses would then become complacent and totally unprepared when the real events came to fruition. So their mission of deception makes perfect sense if you are, in fact, among the elite. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that there is an ongoing and unprecedented mass decline of land and sea life on a global scale. I produced a short video on this story back in 2014 called Extinction Level Decline of Wildlife Populations. So what is causing this sudden decline? Some believe that the root of the cause is the nuclear disaster in Japan, which seems reasonable, except for the fact that the decline actually began years before the disaster took place. So where does the blame originate? One explanation that makes one sit up and pay attention is the fact that underground and underwater methane gas is escaping into the atmosphere and penetrating the oceans due to the significant influx in seismic activity during the past decade. And what could be causing this increase outside of a gravitational influence of a large celestial body on the Earth's core? It is more likely that toxic methane gas is killing both land and sea animals at such a rapid rate, then exacerbated by the radiation poisoning of the Fukushima nuclear catastrophe. This could very well explain what is happening to animal life on Earth. What about events that are happening in the sky these days? Have you considered why so many asteroids and comets are being discovered with little, or in some instances, no advance warning? Is it conceivable that a celestial body has pulled them off of their predicted course and sent them hurtling in a direction that brings them much closer to the Earth? This brings us to the ultimate consideration unfolding as we speak. Could there be a martial law order implemented in the near future? If there was some sort of imminent catastrophe about to happen, then an emergency situation would have to be enacted by Homeland Security in order to keep the public in check for as long as possible. A few years ago, the outgoing Homeland Security Director, Janet Napolitano, said some very frightening words about an upcoming national calamity. As reported by the national media, ABC News, she said the following: "A natural disaster, the likes of which the nation has never seen, is likely on its way." What exactly are we to ascertain from her statement? What type of natural disaster is there that a nation would have never seen? There are only a handful of disasters that would fit that bill, such as a devastating comet or asteroid about to hit the Earth, the eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano, which would have lasting effects across the globe in the way of extreme temperature changes and ultimate crop failures, or a rogue planet passing nearby that could bring about all of the aforementioned calamities in a single package. Since Napolitano suggested that the disaster would occur in the near future,
the most likely probability would be devastation originating from the sky. So what we see here is a top government official indicating just before leaving office that something big is going to happen and that our government may just be preparing for some sort of martial law to take effect. In 2013, the renowned astrophysicist James McCanney indicated that a number of professional scientists in the field of astronomy had informed him that a mini solar system was entering our solar system and would bring with it a bombardment of comets and giant meteors that would threaten all life on Earth. Now, I've included the audio podcast of this rather startling declaration by McCanney, but I have to acknowledge that the accuracy of his statements cannot be verified. However, I feel it is important enough to include in this presentation. So let's listen to what James McCanney is referring to when he speaks of a mini solar system.
There seems to be some serious observation going on in the southern hemisphere and leaks coming out all over the place. It does appear that groups of military and professional astronomers are openly active, let's say, at the Wormwood location in Australia. Well, of course, that's what I've been saying all along. The indicators were all there, and now there are reports that a mini solar system is coming into ours. Basically, you are on your own. Be prepared. That's the best thing I can tell you. And as far as I would suggest that, number one, you need clean water. Number two, you need your own supply of food. And number three, you need some basic first aid equipment. Number four, you need some health maintenance natural products. And my own use on this, I use essential oils. Years, as I've advised people through this era of awaiting a extra solar system object, and by the way, there are many of them. There is not just one. This is what scientists are starting to find out, and of course, they're not telling the public. And it does appear, I've been saying this all along, it now appears that there are leaks coming out of the southern hemisphere of the number of astronomers down there looking at what they are calling a mini solar system moving into ours. This is what apparently Harrington saw back in the early 90s, and in the forefront was, of course, Hale-Bopp, but the comet nucleus that eventually became Hale-Bopp, somewhat of a mini solar system in its own right, but certainly much smaller than the much bigger object coming in behind it. And this would be coming in from the southern hemisphere. The point is, forget about dates. As I said last week and the week before, don't worry about dates. Or don't worry about internet chatter. Don't think you're going to all of a sudden wake up some day and hear on the evening news that, gee, a big object is coming in, and here's the date it's going to be here, folks. That is not going to happen. That's not going to happen on the evening news. My advice is simply to be prepared. If you are not prepared, then what are you thinking about? Are you, and the other thing is, I'm not preaching for people to get prepared because some people don't want to. I have a friend who said, I want to go up to my roof, put a big X on it, paint a big X on my roof, and if something comes in, I want to say, hit here first. That's what one of my friends says. So not everybody wants to be prepared. Not everybody wants to go through the rigors of living through a very difficult time and try and come out the other end when the success rate is going to be very low. So at any rate, but man is a survivor. He's historically been a survivor. The fact that we are here today is a testament to the fact that man has been a survivor. Our space dollars are being completely diverted into little private, very exclusive space programs of the elite. They're not going to share it with you. They're not going to share their cave systems with you. The question that comes out of this, and which is imperative right now, understanding that we are in a time of celestial change in the solar system, a time of when upheaval and severe change, not just average change, but severe change with our sun, with our weather, with the local solar environment of Earth and the other planets, is potentially going to change radically. How can the people in power, supposedly, that are in the positions of federal, state, and in many cases local government, how can they possibly even cope with this when there has been absolutely no planning done for the general public? And the crisis that they propose to prevent by not telling the public is actually going to be 100 times worse once the public gets the drift of what's going on. The cities, the destruction and the looting, the complete destruction of our cities is going to happen internally. You wouldn't have to bring an army in here because the cities will self-destruct on their own. People have not been taught a little thing called personal responsibility, how to take care of yourself and your neighbor and make the best out of a bad situation. Everybody has everything handed to them. Everything is easy. You simply go to the mall with your credit card and everything's taken care of. When all of that changes, I call it the 95% rule. 95% of the public is going to wake up one day with nothing. And the real survivors are going to find a way to deal with all of these situations. And it's not going to be, it won't take long, it's not going to be pretty, but when these major events happen, it's going to happen very quickly. One thing we found out from Comet Bradfield is that these objects, of course, NASA sees them coming from a long time out, from a long distance away, but the public is going to have a week or 2 or 3 notice, is my prediction. And that's all, because we don't have the ability to get to the locations to observe what they are observing and not telling us about. It's a very difficult thing. I've personally tried it myself. And really, once again, especially in the time frame we're in right now, the May time frame, in June, these, of course, are the times that Harrington said were the observing times for those southern locations. So isn't it interesting that in the month of May and June, Australia has all of a sudden become extremely active with astronomers and military types hanging around the Project Wormwood facility in Australia. Now, I'm running out of time here, so I just want to recap what we might see as people on Earth. We may see large numbers of comets. We may see other planets capturing comets. We may see new moons evolving around other planets. We may see planets encountering medium or small or large comets with devastating results. We may see comets coming close to Earth with devastating results. We may be hit by meteors or many more meteors than we do, and of course this has been happening already. In the past year, many bolide type objects coming in and striking Earth. At any rate, I'm out of time.
So if we are referring to a mini solar system, then certainly all logic would tell you that such a system would include planets and orbiting moons, as well as a slew of comets and asteroids that accompany it as it passes through our solar system. Coincidentally, the National Space Defense Radar System, with the ability to be monitored by international astronomers, and which happens to be the only warning system put in place to detect incoming comets and asteroids, was permanently shut down in 2013. So what exactly is it that they are hiding? All of the misinformation that is clouding the truth about an incoming rogue Planet X system has been relentless in the past few years. Even so, the media continues to stir our curiosity by suggesting that something is lurking out there in the confines of our solar system. And NASA privately admits that they are still looking for the elusive Planet X, while at the same time publicly telling us that it doesn't exist. It seems to me, and to anyone who has followed this saga over the years, that NASA has been straddling the fence on this issue because confusion is the best remedy if you want to silence the public and dumb down the masses. Theologians and those who have a strong faith in an all-powerful and loving God will tell you that the way in which to survive the coming tribulation is to trust in the Lord, as it is He alone who will guide the faithful through a time of crisis and turmoil. In other words, it is those who have a foreknowledge of imminent cataclysmic events who will be best prepared to make it through what is called the great and dreadful day of the Lord. This passage best explains what I am referring to about being forewarned and then doing everything within one's means to prepare for an impending calamity. Now, whether you are a devout follower of the teachings of Christ or one who has very little faith in structured religion, if a global disaster strikes, it will affect each of us equally. Regardless of our faith or lack thereof, if an event of such magnitude as the passage of a large planet or a mini solar system were to occur, no one who dwells on this planet will be able to stop this from happening. Therefore, wouldn't it be better for you and your family to have gained the knowledge that tells you that something just isn't right, so that you may prepare in advance by stockpiling the food and supplies necessary to survive the calamity? Irregardless of the severity of this, there are going to be survivors who will have to pick up the pieces and begin anew. And it is those chosen people who must be prepared both physically and mentally for that day. I have been researching and investigating the topic of Planet X for nearly 14 years now. I have viewed and analyzed thousands of images. I have listened to many lectures and commentaries on this very subject. I have interviewed scores of individuals with knowledge and foresight who have all indicated that something dark and sinister is approaching. This is a subject that just doesn't go away, no matter how many times we put our heads in the sand to dismiss it. If it were proven to be a hoax, a concoction of one's imagination, a story of folklore and cultural fairy tales, as NASA would have you believe, then we would no longer be talking about this. And yet, as this system draws closer to the planet, the ability to deny its existence looms large. And this is what we are beginning to see happen at this time. And it will only get more difficult for each of us going forward. How much time do we have before the proof becomes undeniable? I don't know, nor does NASA or the Vatican, or the government elite, or anyone else. So what you want to do with the information that I have presented in this video, or in any of my previous videos, is really up to each of you. You can continue in denial and do nothing, but one thing is for certain: we are living in troubled times, and as the knowledge of both spiritual and physical events begin to enlighten us, then and only then will we have a more complete understanding of the events that are bringing about the time of tribulation that has been spoken of by scholars and theologians throughout civilized society.